Okay, welcome to this society session. My name is Yuko Fujigaki and the moderator of this session. First, let me introduce the panelists of this session. The first, the left side of the public side, Professor Angus Deaton. He's a Nobel laureate in economic science in 2015. And he is now a senior scholar and the Dwight D. Eisenhower Professor of Economic and International Affairs Emeritus, Princeton University. He's also a panelist this morning, and as the panelist, he analyzed aging from the economic point of view. The second panelist is Dr. Sarah Harper. She's a professor of gerontology, University of Oxford. She did a very nice introductory speech this morning on the population aging. And the third panelist is Professor Iwamoto. He's a senior specialist at the National Diet Library. And he was a professor of economics at the University of Tokyo. And his major is public economics. Thank you for coming. Okay, first I'd like to introduce you about this panel's objective. This panel is designed to give you a chance to explore what opportunities and challenges are created for society by an aging population. And what action we means individual, communities, companies, and government. What action we should be taking in order to create a society in which people can live long, happy lives. This kind of a huge topic will have been touched upon briefly in the 20 minutes opening panel of Living in an Aging Society in the morning. And this session will give space for more relaxed discussion around this theme. Okay, let us begin. The first, I have 4 questions for you. And after we discussed for this kind of discussion, I will invite some questions from the floor. The first question is, what matters will occur when the elderly population grows? Okay, the first, Angus.
Well, is this working? Yes, I guess it is. Thank you. Well, we touched on some of this morning, so perhaps we can explore that a little bit more. There obviously are many, many changes that come when there's an older population. A number of those are fiscal challenges, which my colleague here is an expert on, so perhaps he can talk about that a little bit more. But it's also a political challenge. And one of the things I think that some people would argue around the world is that the introduction of social security systems together with aging population has really slowed down economic growth and exerted a great drag on the economy, partly because, and I think this is true around the world, but it's certainly true in the US, the elderly are much more likely to vote than young people, and that gives them a tremendous amount of political power. So certainly in Washington, the lobby of the elderly is one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington. So it's extremely difficult for any politician to take a position that harms the economic interests of the elderly. And so there's a real possibility that the young, who are the most productive and active and innovative parts of society, will be pressed down by the weight of having to provide for the elderly. Now, there's a number of things that can be done about that, but I think that's one big issue that's to do with aging. You can do things like get the elderly to work more years. Many people on the right would like to have not pay-as-you-go pension schemes, but schemes to which people contribute, and then they accumulate, and then they pay out. And I could talk about that for a very long time, but it's been a very disputatious issue. And then there's the well-being of the elderly themselves, and maybe that's something I could come back to. But in many countries in the world, the self-reported well-being of the elderly is higher than middle-aged people, and not necessarily higher than the young. So you get this U-shape of well-being with age, in that the young are very happy because their parents are looking after them. The middle-aged are very unhappy because they're looking after both their own kids and their parents. And the elderly are very happy because the young people are looking after them and the government's looking after them. Many people actually think that's a biological regularity. So there's even papers that claim this is true in monkeys. It's true in gorillas, that gorillas are happier in midlife, unhappy in midlife. But it's not true in Japan. So people in Japan, elderly in Japan, are much less happy than any other group. And I don't know why that is. Maybe we could take a poll around here and see whether older people are happy. But I would be certainly interested to find out why that's the case. It may be that Japan is one of the oldest societies in the world. The burden of the elderly is beginning to catch up even with them. But those are a couple of things that I've been thinking about.
Thank you. Okay. About Salah.
Okay. That was very interesting, and in a way, just to sort of take that a little further, and particularly look at, I suppose, the way society may have to change, but in particular to say that actually a lot of what we're talking about is to do with health. This is a very strange thing. Hang on. So in other words, we have this idea that people keep talking about the elderly as though they're a category, and I think we should avoid that. Basically, you are an adult, and you stay being an adult. And a lot of that is to do with how we define old age. So if we can maintain the health status of people throughout their lives, and that obviously is the goal of biology, and it's the goal of economics and sociology and behavioral science, then I think you can actually argue that having this cutoff at 60 or 65, which is what we do at the moment, particularly in our statistics, becomes much more irrelevant, or one could even say meaningless. So long as across your society people stay fit and healthy, you could argue that means that you behave as a functioning adult, so you are productive, and that could be in the labour market, or it could be in your community or in your family, well into your 60s, 70s, and even 80s. And if we had that kind of situation, we would dramatically reduce, from a dependency point of view, the aging societies across the world, because obviously we would have far more people who are active, both paying taxes and contributing in other ways to our society. So one thing is to say that if we just increase the health of our population and maintain that across the life course to later and later ages, then in many ways you are solving the so-called aging problem. Except then you come back to something that I talked a little bit about at the beginning, which is to do with this generational succession. And the fact, what do you do about generation equity and equality between the generations, as well as within a generation, if young people know in their 20s it's going to be 60 years before they will become top of their company or they will be head of their family. And in a way, it sort of builds on the kind of things that Angus was talking about, which is the voting lobby of older people, the sucking of resources towards a particular group, and that's why I said to grow old in a society that is itself old is very different. And we do know that in many high-income countries, older adults are taking proportionately higher amounts, particularly of public spending, than younger adults. Although I think we must be careful that we don't start going into this kind of a situation where you have, at the moment, a lot of, particularly in Europe, I think, pent-up anxiety from younger people who see these older, what they call the baby boomers, going through. And if we're not careful, we will go back to what we had 20, 30 years ago, when old people were the poverty group in many societies. So I think there are a lot of tensions that are outside, actually, older people themselves, but are much more within the way that older people are sitting within societies. And very interesting what you said about politics, because I know until very recently, there wasn't much evidence that older people voted as a group. And but the thing was, the politicians believed they did. And there was a very nice paper written in the UK about 10 years ago which showed that actually older people, because they belonged to families and communities, were as likely to vote for things that benefited their children and grandchildren, but the politicians saw them as this grey group. I think that's now breaking down, and I think, I don't know enough, but I do believe that even in the Trump election, it was a lot of older adults who voted, and definitely in my country, Brexit was dominated by older adults. So I think that's something we really need to understand, the power of the elderly or elderly people through the ballot box. But they, I would say, are the main framing of what I think is important.
Okay, thanks.
I would like to touch on issues in social security program, which Professor Angus Deaton touched on this morning session. Okay, so a longer life expectancy is good for us because we have a much longer lifetime and we enjoy it. But a problem happens to the social security programs. So if we contribute the program constantly over the aging process, it cannot finance no longer subsequently bigger pension benefits. So we need to cut benefits or raise the burdens. This is a simple arithmetic, but it's unpleasant. Or maybe reasonable solution is we need both. So this is a very politically difficult decision to make. But this is very difficult political issues around the world. And Japan has another serious problem regarding social security programs. Japan has a low birth rate. The total fertility rate has been less than 2 during nearly a half century, and less than 1.5 during at least 20 years. So if we have the benefits of social security programs has been financed mainly by the contribution of the younger generations. So if we have fewer younger generations, it is very difficult for the program to finance the growing expenditure of social security program. So Japan and the other countries with a low birth rate have a more serious problem about the social security issues. Okay, so how to deal with it? It is a very difficult solution. I don't have a definite answer, but an important way to do is that we need to quantify the impact, financial impact of those aging process on the economy. So many economists try to estimate the future increase in healthcare service expenditure and long-term care expenditure. But the difficult thing is to, as an economist, it is very difficult to estimate the future progress of technology related with health care services. So medicine. Innovative medicine, innovative technology will be created in the future. As economics, it is very difficult to evaluate it. And on the other side, physicians and scientists continuously make a progress, make an innovation without calculating a financial impact on the society. So we need a collaborative work with economists and scientists to quantify the financial impact on the society. So knowing something not terrible is much worse than knowing something known terrible. So if common people is informed about the financial impact, maybe a politically difficult decision will be accepted at the voting process. And Professor Angus Deaton just mentioned a very interesting point. Japanese elderly are not happy compared to the other countries. So I just brief my feeling about it. Okay. Do you think, do many Japanese think you and your future is not happy? Okay, so one possibility is it is real. But I think another possibility, there is a problem in wording in survey, such kind of survey. So yeah, so happy is a subjective measure. Okay, so how people decide they are happy, it depends on their subjectivity, and it depends on culture. It's culture. Okay, so in Japanese, for Japanese, so happy is a very, very extraordinary state compared to the other country, the other people. Okay, so I think that some other countries, in some other countries, people feel happy when their living standard is on average, or just below, just above on the average. But in such a case, Japanese that don't say they are happy. So how to deal with wording is a very difficult, but it is important. It's important research question. Okay, so I'm not clear answers, but so happiness is a very important research topic.
Thanks. Are you going to?
Let me just say a brief word about happiness. I don't like to ask people whether they're happy or not, or I do, but it's not what I was talking about here. The question I was referring to here is a question which says, if you think about your life as a whole, and think of your life as a ladder with 0, the worst possible life you could imagine for yourself, and 10, the best possible life you could imagine for yourself, where would you rank yourself? Excuse me. The word happiness does not arise anywhere in that question. It's purely an evaluation of life question. And it's certainly true that in the East, not just Japan, but in China, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Vietnam, people rank themselves relatively low. There's a feeling, I think, in Eastern cultures in general, that you don't really want to say you're very happy. I often joke that where I come from in Scotland, saying you're happy is a disease. And people think there's something seriously wrong with you if you really claim your life is going well. But this doesn't, that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the difference between the elderly and the young. And so this effect, if it is an effect, a reporting effect in the East, would not affect the difference between old and young. I want to come back to both healthcare and to voting later, but I yield to...
Yeah. I think that was the last point was very important. I remember a not very good survey done about 15 years ago, which compared this life satisfaction of older people in Japan with America. And they reported that people in America, older people in America, were far more positive about the care that their children were giving than in Japan. Basically, it was all expectations. So people in Japan had expected far more care, and they were disappointed that their children, whereas people in America were thinking our children are not going to care for us, and in actual fact, the care they got was far higher. So there is a lot about expectations, I think, and how we perceive our life course and what different stages are going to be like. But I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. So the first questions, the panelists pointed out, on one hand, the fiscal challenge and the political challenge and the problem of equality and the tension between generations and the social security problem. That is the institutional point of view. And on the other hand, subjective rating on happiness is a kind of a more subjective areas question. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. What should the government and companies do to create a society in which people can live a long, happy life on a limited budget?
Well, the first thing I'd say is let's make the budget bigger. You know, so you don't necessarily have to, and this has come up several times. There's no reason to assume that elderly cannot contribute to society over a whole range of activities. And that's part of the wealth of society. So we don't have to take it as given that an old society is a poor society. I don't think that follows at all. You asked about what the government should do to make people live long. One of the things that's really problematic in an aging society is dealing with healthcare. And it's at its very worst in the United States when healthcare is not under social control at all, and where private companies are allowed to make large sums of money out of sick people. Most medicines are consumed by the elderly. Most surgery is consumed by the elderly, and for the obvious reason that you're pretty healthy when you're young, and it's only when you get old that you need this health care. So an older society is going to use more health care, and health care is expensive. But the thing that makes it a really wicked problem, as it were, is that there's a lot of technical change in health care. Some of it's good. Some of it is a complete waste of time. So there's an enormous amount of new devices, new scanners, new medicines that are very expensive and not very effective. And so countries have to have control over that process. And there's a big difference here between the two countries I know best, the US and the UK. The UK, they have a thing called NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, or something of the sort. And basically, it looks at a cost-benefit analysis of new medicines, of new techniques, of new procedures. And if they don't yield, you know, it's very hard to do this, but nevertheless, doing something is better than doing nothing. And so a lot of techniques are not allowed to be used. New medicines are not allowed to be used. There's a lot of public controversy over that, but it's some way of holding up and also forgetting the new techniques that are really good, because there are these new techniques that really will save lives. There are cancer drugs that will keep people alive longer. A lot of the progress against heart disease has come from new medicines. And so you really want to be able to let those through, but not let everything through. In the United States, we let everything through, and it's a catastrophe because the government is funding the health care for the elderly. The elderly population is larging, and it's a huge trough at which pharmaceutical companies and hospitals and doctors can feed at and get rich at the expense of the rest of us. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So controlling healthcare costs is a big part of having a successfully aging society.
I think that's absolutely right. If moving away from health, if I look at what the UK government has been doing, so I recently chaired a big review, along in fact with Tom Kirkwood, who's next door to technology, and what we tried to say was, if we move away from health and we move away from pensions, what other things does the British society have to do? And I think that's the really important thing. We looked at education, we looked at changing work, we looked at the built environment, and what we said was, what kind of a society do you need when half your population is aged over 50, which within Western Europe we will be heading to within the next 10, 15 years or so. And so we very much took a life course approach, and a little bit like what I was talking about this morning, the idea that we have these very segmented lives. We stop education at 25, and yet in today's modern world, we need to upgrade our skills across our life course. So we need lifetime education that is accessible to everybody so that they can constantly keep their skills up. We need a working environment that is able to adapt to all ages. And that doesn't just mean sort of ergonomics, changing the working environments. It means changing HR practices, understanding that when you're younger, you may have childcare responsibility. When you're in midlife, you may have elder care responsibility. And as you get older, you may have other types of demands. So we change the whole sort of human resources. And we just have this much more flexible life. And then we do, in fact, what Japan is very good at doing is we look at our physical environment, the kind of homes we live in, the kind of workplaces, how we travel. And I think that's really important. Interestingly, at the moment, the government has built one of the 4 challenges it sees for the UK industrial strategy. One of them is around energy, one is around a clean environment, one is about AI, and the 4th, which is 25% of the initiative, is about the aging population. And the government is working very hard with industry at the moment to try and get businesses not only to change their working practices, but also really to understand that they need to start developing products and technologies and services for older people. And to a certain extent, there's almost a little bit of resistance. I think a lot of companies haven't quite yet understood the tremendous opportunities that there are of refocusing everything from financial services across to just the basic daily goods that we consume could be revisited and made more appropriate for everyone of all age, which basically means if you make it appropriate for people who have slightly less dexterity, mobility, maybe their vision isn't so good, it actually benefits the whole population. So I would say that both governments and industry need to understand that populations are aging, and that means that the actual characteristics of many of those populations will change, but build the whole environment, not just health and pensions, but everything to do with our society needs to subtly change over the coming decades.
Okay, thanks. Professor Yamamoto.
Yes. I would like to introduce one interesting observation just happened in Japan. Japan projected the labor force would decline when baby boomers began to retire since around 2007. So if we have fewer workers, it is very difficult for Social Security program to be financed. But actually, we observed the increase in labor force that after 2007. In particular, the labor force participation rate of the elderly between age 65 and 70 increased dramatically for male and for female. Okay, so if the given pattern of labor force participation, the finance problem would be very difficult. But if we look at the problem from a different perspective, we'll have a different picture. If the demand structure does not change very much, problem is that how fewer workers produce what the increased elderly need. The answer is it is impossible. So producers hired additional workers to meet the demand for the demand created by the elderly. Okay, so that's one reason why labor force participation rate of the elderly increased. And the elderly wanted to continue to work after they reached the mandatory retirement rate. But working condition became different from full-time regular workers to part-time non-regular workers. So they changed the labor force participation patterns, but they continue to work. So that change makes that something different from the perspectives of budget programs. We previously projected the financial pattern given the labor force participation rate, but labor market is enough to labor market is flexible enough to adjust the changing labor supply patterns, the picture may be more optimistic than we thought. So the important thing is that so raising labor force participation is helpful to tackle with financial problems. Actually, Japanese government and the private companies try to prolong the mandatory retirement age currently from around 65 maybe to 68 or 20. So paying more, contribute more with a given income is very difficult. But paying more with higher income may be easier than we thought. Okay, so that's something important attempt to try to it.
Okay, thanks. So let us move to the next question. What should individuals and communities do to create a society in which people can live long, happy life? So it's I asked in the previous question on the government side, but this time from the individual side.
You want to start this time?
Okay. I think the really important thing is this life course approach, because I think we now are very aware that from a social behavioral point of view, if you believe that maintaining good health as long as possible is going to be transformational, not only for society but for the individual, it's a matter of us all changing our lifestyles from when we're very young. And not only tackling that very interesting question that you both brought up around midlife, but actually starting with children and helping them really understand that it is around, maybe not when they're children, but smoking, alcohol, diet, exercise, etc. We really, I think, from a behavioral point of view, understand the drivers behind what potentially healthy living is, and we're beginning to understand how it's playing out among different groups in society. And so it's individuals, I think, coming to terms with the fact that they may well live very long lives, and therefore they've got to prepare across that life. And that does mean around health and diet, but it also means around financial preparedness. And I think there is, I think in many European populations, not all, but particularly I think some of those northern populations, the Scandinavians, the British, for example, the Dutch, to a certain extent the Germans, are beginning to wake up to the fact that it is preparing across the life course. And it's preparing financially, and it's preparing personally, and it is also just looking at the work-education dynamic. So I would say it's all around preparation and having governments and other structures which help the individual prepare for long lives. And definitely, I think in many countries, young people are beginning to realize this. So I think things for the future are looking reasonable in many high-income countries. And I'm sure maybe I've heard talks in Japan exactly the same, saying that younger Japanese people are now beginning to prepare for these long lives.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yes. It's something, one insight that economists had a long time ago, which I think is not always very well understood, is that the returns to education depend on how long you're going to live. Because you invest a lot in this education, either by having to pay for it, or just because you can't be working when you're in school. And the return to that accrues over however many years you have. So if you're going to live a lot longer, it makes sense to spend longer in school. And I'm not sure, I think in Britain there's been a huge increase in the last few years even in people going to college.
Yes.
And that surely, I don't know whether it's inspired by that, and it's certainly a really good thing. One of the things we haven't talked about very much this morning or today, until Sarah just raised it just now, is smoking. And smoking, you know, I'm a bit of a renegade on smoking. I don't smoke, and I haven't smoked for many, many years. So I'm not urging people to smoke. Also, I think there's been a tendency to over-attribute to medical science the increases in longevity over the past decades, and a tremendous amount of that has to do with people quitting smoking. But, you know, we understand very little about the link between smoking and health, and Japan is one of the incredible examples where smoking rates are still very, very high, especially among men, though they've been decreasing. And yet you have the longest life expectancy in the world, which is sort of a disproof on the face of it to the idea that smoking's very bad for your health. I'm also one of these people, I really am a libertarian at some level, and there's very little evidence that people don't understand the risks of smoking. In fact, most surveys show that people overestimate the risks of smoking. If you ask them what's your chance of dying of lung cancer if you smoke, they way, way overestimate what the statistics show that is. So I tend to think, you know, if people are not smoking in my face, then, you know, if they want to smoke, I don't think we should be running propaganda to stop them. We should certainly tax cigarettes to the point where they cover the healthcare costs and so on. And we should stop people smoking in other people's hotel rooms or things like that. But I'm rather libertarian towards smoking. And I think people drinking alcohol throughout their lives is somewhat similar. There are great pleasures in these things. And there are obvious dangers there too. But I don't think it's our job to maximize other people's life expectancy when they make their own decisions for themselves. I know in the public health community that's a horrible thing to say, and people get really upset with me. But I'm not a paternalist, and I do believe that individuals should choose what they think is best for them in full information, and I really believe in that.
Okay.
When we compare the health status between smokers and non-smokers in Japan, smokers have smoker is less healthy, so smoking is really harm in Japan. Okay, so that's one point. Okay, so my comment, I'm afraid my comment will duplicate what Angus and Sarah already told. Aging issue is a serious problem for the elderly, but the aging issue is more serious for the younger generations because the future we will have a more serious problem in the future. And the important thing is that investment in financial assets, health capital, and social capital are all important for younger generations. So we now have a longer lifetime. Our younger generation will have a longer lifetime. So they need to redesign the resource allocation between work and leisure during a longer lifetime. So working longer will be a common practice in the future society. And it will help the financial condition of social security programs. But the important thing is that healthy people can work longer. So investment in health capital will really help to mitigate the health shock, negative shock of illness on their lifetime. Another important investment is on social capital. Because family and community will play an important role in making the life after retirement happy. But now the increasing number of younger generation will stay alone because they are not married. So family will not work then. So the community will be more important in the future. But the problem is that current male, so the problem is more severe than current the male workers because they work very long during their working age. So they have no connectivity with community. So the governments, particularly municipal governments, try hard to bring them into the community. So investment in social capital will be an important point for making life after retirement happy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for giving us individual strategy as well as system strategy. Okay, so there are 5 minutes left. So now I'd like to invite your free questions from the audience. Are there any questions? Okay. Are there any mics?
Thank you very much for that really enlightening discussion. My question is for Professor Deaton. To quote him, you said, getting the elderly to work more years was your suggestion. And I was wondering, with automation and AI and immigration, balancing the job market and keeping the unemployment numbers is already a tightrope walk. So in these circumstances, especially from the American or even the European perspective, how can we make the elderly work more years without upsetting or putting these things together in the equation?
Yeah, I think it has to be handled very carefully. I don't think we should be making anyone work. So I wouldn't like to associate myself with that term. I think we should do away with things that stop people working, which we have quite a lot of right now. In spite of everything you've ever heard about artificial intelligence or globalization, there's no shortage of jobs. So that there are more people working in America now, it's maybe not quite true, but it's pretty close to being true, that we have one of the lowest unemployment rates forever. I mean, the problem is the quality of the jobs. And so part of it is that, you can't necessarily expect the elderly to have wonderful jobs, but they can contribute, and many times they can contribute in ways that are not necessarily financial. But what you say is right. People worry about this, and any government program that encouraged elderly to go back to work would, run into that sort of difficulty. There's also the issue that Sarah talked about. We haven't talked about much. Is there is real intergenerational conflict. So that you don't want old people sitting around ordering everybody around and stopping creativity by younger people. So that's got to be taken into account too. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you have?
I don't know if this will work.
Too much technology.
Well, we also have this thing stuck in our ears.
Please set interpretation receiver. Channel 2.
Okay.
What number is that?
Okay.
Channel 2.
Okay. 聞こえてますでしょ?
Can you hear me? Can you hear the translator's voice? Okay. So I'm going to ask my question in Japanese. I have a question to Drs. Deaton and Dr. Harper. Common question to both of you that is about happiness. Happiness. What is happiness? My thinking is that it's the quality of life. Quality of life. I think it's related to quality of life. If we are not realizing the quality of life, if we do not feel that the life is rewarding, we are not happy, regardless of how much materials you have, how much money you have. I don't think that alone would make you happy. So, Dr. Deaton, Dr. Harper, my question for you is this: happiness and the quality of life, how do you think they are related to each other?
Thank you.
This is for you.
Not in any very simple way. The work that I and my colleagues have done on happiness in recent years is that it's actually very important to separate those things so that actually people can be very happy even though their life is going very, very badly. You know, so the example is that you could be locked up in a prison cell. You could be living in a village where you're subject to a lot of deprivation. And on the other hand, you could be happy. And Amartya Sen always likes to say that happiness might be a coping strategy in situations where people are very deprived. And so that doesn't mean that you can't ignore their deprivation just because they're happy. On the other hand, if you ask those persons whether their life is going well, they would tend to say, no, my life is not going well, but I did experience some happiness today. So the experience of happiness, which is like a mood, you know, is not a summary of your life. And that's why I think it's very important when we're making these social judgments to think hard about what it is you want to measure. And that's why I prefer the quality of life or life evaluation questions rather than questions about emotion. Yeah. I don't know if you want to add to that, Sarah.
No, I mean, you're an expert on this, and
I'm not sure. There's no experts on happiness.
No, thank you. I agree.
You agree?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let us close this session. Everyone experiences aging, but the problem an individual face depends on what year they were born, as well as their life stage. But on the other hand, the institutional design should be made for everyone. So there is a gap, always gap between the individual demands for aging society and the institutional design. So bridging this gap is very, very important. So we learned a lot from your discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now take a 15-minute break. Next stream to be...
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Maybe start. Okay. Welcome to the session 2B called Innovation. Innovation and Innovations. So I'm happy to have 4 panelists you see here. I start with Tim Hunt and Sarah Harper, Ishiyama-san, you now, and Sankai-san, you almost already know the name and all this. So the topics here today. What we know is that aging is a natural phenomenon we can go against. And we know that science is quite advancing to have a better understanding, but not fully. But at the same time, we have to deal with the aging phenomena. That's why we have to take account of the society as such and make, if it's possible, friendly for elderly and aging. So I'm thrilled to have 2 Japanese researchers and entrepreneurs and innovators taking concrete action on the ground. So we can have ideas, theory, but we need to have action on the ground. So we listen to both of you first, and then think about what could be the implication for science, for society, and for all of us, because I'm already 67, 8, so everybody is moving to aging phenomena. So it's concerned everybody, all of you and all of me. So I will start with Sankai-san. I know that each time I have a discussion with you, yes. I know that you have something new. And let me know what's the newest challenge for you to make aging society very more friendly and very welfare-being. So please.
Okay. Anyway, so now you just mentioned about the aging societies, and according to aging, we will have some very severe problems. So in order to solve this one, I try to develop the latest new innovative technologies. And so anyway, I quickly prepared these devices within 4 or 5 years, or maybe 4 years or 5 years. And anyway, in order to support the elderly person's work, in order to improve in order to promote the treatment of the elderly person, the patients, and so on. And of course, sometimes these robotic technology also can be used, or cybernetic technology also can be used. Okay? And anyway, all of these systems has a communication system through the internet. Then we can obtain so many important humans data and things data. So-called IOH/IoT. And this one is the examples. So this elderly person, 86 years old person, guy, he had a tumor and he had a clinical operation. After that, he should stay on the bed 1 week or 2 weeks more, and finally he cannot stand upstairs, but cannot stand up from the bed. But by using this device, he can stand up and sit down. So we prepared a 30 minutes course, and then, so 1 month later, anyway, his function dramatically changed. Okay, so we can change the very elderly person's situation. And this one is another example for the child, also similar. And in this case, he is a spinal cord injury patient. And we remove it. Okay. So even the complete spinal injury patients starts to move. Unbelievable, really unbelievable. So it means these technology has some potentials to support the aging societies. Anyway, so many data is now gatherings, okay, during the treatment, during in the daily life, and foods, meals, informations, and life behaviors, information, Okay, anyway, I would like to connect the human's internal situation, brain nerve system to the supercomputers, directly in order to support the aging society.
Thank you. First slide was really fascinating. So many data and technology, all the technologies. But finally, what you want to achieve is really transforming our society. Yes. How do you feel, Sarah? Because you are specialist in aging. When you see this kind of pictures, are you happy with that? Oh, and you can, both of you.
I'm deeply suspicious myself. Deeply suspicious. How much is this going to cost?
Cost?
Yeah, for the whole population. I mean, let's say, what is Japan, 170 million?
Oh, yes. So currently, anyway, these devices can be used, maybe that example is only 30 minutes use. Then one day, so many persons can use it.
So you can share it?
Yes, share it. So sharing is very important. Yes, because in order to reduce the public cost. Yes. So, of course, you think, wow, this technology's price is very expensive. So I consider how to distribute or install the technologies to the civil societies.
Indeed.
Yes. So currently, I started to distribute this system as a rental systems. Yes. And maybe if he uses 1 hour, so 1 hour cost is almost similar to the a cup of coffee of the Tokyo Imperial Hotel.
One of my favorites, yes. But I can see that if I could not stand up and, this enabled it, that would be fantastic. I mean, it's like my mother-in-law, who is no longer, she died when she was 94 years old, but, both her hips had been replaced at no doubt considerable cost, actually, but it was considered worth it, even though it was done when she was maybe 80 years old or something like that, right? So we already spend quite a lot of money looking after our old people and replacing knees and hips and simple things like that. You're going one electronic stage further, huh?
So yes, anyway, important thing is how to improve the independency. So I always thinking about how to upgrade the independency. Then by using such kind of technologies, maybe we can upgrade the independence. Even the very severe bedridden person cases. So normal cases, care supporters always beside of these patients or other persons. But if these patients try to call the nurse or turn off the lights or the TV channels by themselves. That one is one of the solutions or the breakthrough in order to reduce care costs.
Right, so they just have to think they'd like to watch something on television and it's up on their screen. Yeah?
Yes, I think so.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Or they call a nurse.
So before moving to Shiyama-san, just your reaction from Sarah.
No, I mean, and obviously we heard quite a lot about this morning, and I think the kind of technology and also that you've been talking about obviously is really life-enhancing. And I suppose that the debate that I've been involved with in the UK is making sure that AI and robotics and machine learning are benefiting people, and that we must always remember that the people are there, and that these cybernotics or robotics will assist people. And I think we're very much in a transition, and I think it's very important that we have an open debate. And it's possible that Japan is more accepting to some things that maybe in the UK we would see as a bit of an intrusion. But in both societies, I think we have to be aware of how far this can go, and remember that if it becomes intrusive in some way and starts to replicate social relationships where we don't really as a society think that is appropriate, that we have the means to be able to say, actually stop. We know you can do this, but as within our human society, we would like to do things differently. And I'm not so concerned about the kind of work you're talking about, which I think is fantastic. But I think there is some concern, particularly within family relationships, where we might have machines who take over some of the caring tasks. And that sort of releases the rest of us from having to care for our older population. Because, well, we know that our mums have got Alexa, or we know there's a robot who is actually providing companion. And there has definitely been some discussion in the UK how the children and the neighbours will think, well, it is no longer my responsibility because a machine has come in. And maybe that will become acceptable, but I think we are in a transition at the moment.
Exactly, we are under the transition phase. And we have to experiment things, and at the same time learning about what's the implication, not only for the technological point of view, social and for the affective and family. So we try to move to Ishiyama-san, please.
So,
tell us what you're doing.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce how we can apply artificial intelligence for dementia care through the videos. For example, here's a patient and she's dementia and aggressive behavior is very strong and she cannot acceptable for the care. But if we improve our care communication, we can make this kind of change. She can talk, she can eat, she can walk with some support, and in this time, very lucky case, she make up by herself. So this is the care method named Humanitude from France. Multimodal comprehensive care, usually we say. Eye contact and verbal communication and touching and understanding, these 4 components are very important. So now we are trying to analyze the care video by using deep learning. We analyze the modality of eye contact and verbal communication and touch. So the left one is the senior care staff. The right one is junior care staff. So the modality itself is quite different. We are analyzing by using deep learning these kind of modalities. Then we are doing a kind of training of this evidence-based care analyzed by AI in Fukuoka City. So just 2 hours training, and after 1 month later, the behavioral psychological symptoms of dementia of care receiver 20% down, and burden of caregiver 28% down. So this is very effective. That's why now we are creating the new system named Coaching AI. So please watch the video. So if we send the care video that we do to the AI, then AI can analyze automatically the modality of eye contact or verbal communication and touch. And also not only AI, but also human can teach how to improve their care. So we can say it's a kind of the social care network, including artificial intelligence. So by using these kind of technologies, now we are combining the 3 types of evidence: computer science evidence, that is the modality of care, and also the medical science evidence, like BPSD, and also the now we are trying to related to create a kind of relationship between economics also. Then. So, for example, in the case of the Fukuoka City, training for 1 person is just $150, but maybe we will create a more big impact to reduce social security expense. So usually we say it's a kind of the scheme of the social impact bond, new scheme of the finance to reduce social security expense. So now we are trying to introduce this kind of scheme by using AI.
Thank you. I'm thrilled with the name Humanitude.
Humanitude, yes.
Because you are putting at the center human, and you are using all the IT and also data AI technology to show the impacts of human touch. That's thrilled.
Very interesting.
What's your reaction? You from Sarah? Or?
No. I mean, I think that's a very sensitive approach, and I think also you are doing some work around the workplace and the sort of skills that we're going to change, and in particular maybe how older adults can capitalize on this. And I know when we look at sort of working lives and the way that AI, and we've talked about, there's a fantastic study out of Oxford by Frey and Osborne, where they're dividing, using mathematical algorithms, they're dividing jobs or occupations up into tasks, and the way these tasks are going to be rebundled going forward. So the human will do these tasks and the robot will do that. And there's been huge impact on older workers who suddenly, particularly in manufacturing, find that with the use of robotics, their job has changed. They're now computer programmers rather than actually being factory workers, but it's really enhanced their lives. And I think that's actually a very beneficial thing, unlike our students, where we say we have no idea what's going to happen in the world of work because the way that new technology, particularly machine learning and AI, are changing the kind of tasks that we will be doing in the future. It's very difficult to plan. But for an older adult, looking maybe at the next 10 or 15 years, I think there's a lot of research and work that can be done in that area as well.
Thank you.
It's really improving the quality of elderly, but at the same time, quality of life of caregivers. And in particular, when you're looking after families, accompanying them, it's really useful for all of us, and it's really enhancing the quality. I'm tricked because we have two cases, and you are working not independently. Why not have some ideas about combining your tools?
So, to tell the truth, not not independent, because he now became my impact programs. He now participating. Okay. Yes.
So you two are talking to each other. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes.
That's very good.
Yes. So I was very surprised. Today I saw. Yesterday I saw him. Wow. So today's meeting is a very focused meeting, I think. Yeah.
Very good.
Yes. And I would like to add. So anyway, he now developed such kind of systems in order to increase the human relationships. That one's very important. And I try to reduce the very severe work and so on by using technology and so on. Okay, and anyway, so by combining these systems, anyway, we can realize the establish techno-peer support. Okay, human support each other and technology add here and work together.
Sarah, can I ask, why is it that you need to teach humans how to do interaction? Is it not a natural thing that we know how to interact with each other?
Yes, what's happened to nurses' training courses, for example?
The system is not only for the specialist in the nursing care home, but also the usual family. If we'd like to teach only in the nursing house, just real world training is okay. But if in Japan, for example, toward 2045, as you know, the more than 50% is more than 60% is more than 50 years old. Yeah. Right. So almost everyone needs to do care, but it is a little bit difficult to train everyone. So that's why now we are thinking we need to use AI and online system.
But when you were talking about things like eye-to-eye contact, have we lost something in our society? Isn't that a natural human thing? Or is it that we have split our generations up so that generations don't know, so young people don't naturally know how to relate to people older? Is it not a natural thing to know how to care for someone?
Yes, so that's why we also needed to create a kind of the content, video content. It's a kind of the explanation of the mechanism. Why we need to do this kind of eye contact, like the inside 20 centimeters, or the face orientation is very straight, because once we will be the dementia, our cognition will be very limited. So that's why we need to do that.
So for dementia. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But it seems to me that actually this kind of thing would be much more useful, or at least as useful, in the normal workplace. I mean, you know, in my university, there have been several recent accusations of bullying by managers, for example, and I have a feeling that if they took your training courses, they would be use other methods to get their staff to behave as they wished. No?
Yes, I think so. So that's why not only for the care, but also all of the communication, we can apply this system.
And presumably this is useful if you want eventually for robots to carry this out. Your research could feed into the kind of world you live in, so that there is facial recognition with robots. And
so now we are developing such kind of systems to analyze the humans' communications and so on. Then at that time, these real challenges very important to obtain the feedback from the actual site.
Yes.
Yes.
But you know, I heard an amusing thing recently where somebody was explaining that she could tell her twin daughters apart and had always been able to tell them apart from birth, but their iPhone could not distinguish between them.
Interesting. Yes. 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 Yes.
So I think AI may have a little way to go yet before it's perfect.
I think that the technology we are deploying and improving not only for solving aging phenomena, but more generally in the human relationship, and then foresee what could be the relationship between human and machine. It's maybe improved by your experiences. That could be something additional to elderly care and so on. So that's fabulous.
So I'm thinking that through super aging society, we can learn how to communicate. So if we don't know there exists a kind of the dementia person, we cannot understand that why eye contact is important or touching is important. But because now we are at the super aging society, through these kind of elder people, we can learn what is the appropriate communication of a human.
So the video you showed of the very disturbed elderly person with dementia.
Yes.
And then suddenly she was calm.
Yes.
I missed what exactly had you done? What was the intervention between those two stages?
Yes. So at that time, she was just sleeping in the bed, almost no standing.
Yes.
And also she was protected. Because her aggressive behavior is very strong.
Yeah.
So this kind of feedback, she became step by step, the PPSD was really increased. But because we changed the care, we released these kind of protecting things, and also we try to make her standing and communication, talking and eating. So step by step, she changed like that.
So it was simply changing the care that enhanced her well-being. So yes, so all you did was you learned what kind of a care was appropriate, and then you changed it.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I guess she was sort of very nervous and felt she was being messed around before, and by being gentler with her somehow, it calmed her down. Yes.
So based on your experimentation on the ground, next step will be scaling up. What is your plan? Based on what you are doing actually, to be beneficial for more people. So do you have any plan for the moment, or it will come later? Both of you.
Okay. So my case, so anyway, to treat the human in the medical side and the welfare side, everything. So society has some regulations and international rules and so on. Then, so the collaboration between the basic research side and the actual challenge side and the political side should work together. Then at that time, so in order to expand these challenges in the actual society, then we should discuss. Maybe today also the political person or the government side person are there. So anyway, as I ask them, so please discuss and arrange some current rules. So for the latest technologies, the latest approaches and so on. That one is very important. So yesterday I arrived at Japan from Asian areas because the G7 countries has a very complicated rules. So it's really hard work to change these systems. But so many persons recognize this. So they prepare the ideal and suitable guidelines and rules. Then we can bring these latest versions to the such kind of societies to expand and to prove or to analyze these approaches, I think. That one is one strategy.
Yeah, one constraint for you is that we have strong existing regulations, in particular in the health. And that's why when you want to add something new here, you have to review all the existing one, and it's very time-consuming, and you have to negotiate with politicians or people. So it's really challenging for you, but you are doing tackling.
So for examples, so robotic technology are now used in the world, but especially in the factories. But there is one rule: robots should not work with a human. So in the factories, these robots should be separated by the fence. Okay. So if we try to install this technology to the actual daily life for the hospitals and welfare beings and fields and so on, it's very difficult. So I became an expert member of the ISO, and we prepared some guideline and rules. And I asked to the approval organization, please refer these rules. And finally, they gave us the approvals. But anyway, this procedure is very important. Then, of course, I'm not a Superman. Then, so such kind of different fields collaborations are very important to improve the, to realize the social innovations, I think.
And for your case, it's much easier to extend your activities, scale up, or the same problem you have to address?
Yes, it is a little bit difficult, but we are trying. So how much the system will reduce the social security expenses, that is my next step. So, for example, toward 2025, national insurance nursing care cost will be in Japan about more than $200 billion. So if we can reduce, as I said, that we have already succeeded to reduce behavioral psychological symptoms of dementia 20% by this system. If we can reduce the social security expense 20%, it means $40 billion. So that's
good argument.
That is my next
sales point.
Challenge. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I will be listening to Sarah and the team. How do you see these cases in Japan? Is it possible to duplicate or challenge the experiment in your own country? Or do you see any resistance because it's robots? And so how do you see?
So we are doing some evaluation work in Oxford and also working with the British government around PARO, who is this therapeutic seal. I'm sure you know about PARO. And the idea...
Therapeutic seal?
A therapeutic seal. So in
what do you mean a therapeutic seal?
Okay, so in other...
performing seal?
No, it's... if you are an older person, we know that companionship is very important, and we know that pets... If you have a dog or a cat to look after, it enhances your well-being. Many, many people can't, however, have a dog or a cat. And so this therapeutic robot is a baby seal.
Oh, I see.
And the reason why they chose the seal is because it doesn't have any cultural baggage. So you have probably, got a relationship with a dog or a cat, and you may not like them, but you've probably never held a baby seal. And actually holding a real baby seal is probably not very nice.
Well, I met some baby seals the other day, actually, in California. Yes.
Okay, right.
they were quite big and scary.
Right. So, and the idea is with this robot, and the technology is now fantastic, and the robot gets to know you, it recognizes your voice.
Oh, God. So this is like Furby.
Yes, but incredibly...
We had to throw Furby away. It was squealing from the garbage can. It's terrible.
But incredibly sort of advanced technology.
Much more advanced,
yes. And in Japan, both in nursing homes and in people's homes, there's quite a lot of evaluation now which suggests it really does enhance well-being.
Wow.
And reduces depression among older people. Fantastic results with dementia and with children who are autistic. So what we're looking at is, would it be culturally appropriate to bring it into a European society? And we've done we and some other colleagues have done some fantastic tests in Denmark, and Denmark is maybe more similar to the UK than Japan is from a cultural family point of view, and the results are very good. And I was in New Zealand last year, and because the New Zealand government had just awarded the Takanori, who is the inventor, a big prize.
It's a Japanese seal.
It's a Japanese seal.
Researcher.
Yes, yeah. And many Japanese people many New Zealand people were very interested in it. So I think culturally it will take a while, but definitely many European-style countries are looking at what you're doing here.
What is your view? If you...
He's lovely. I want to take
I need to see this seal before I have an opinion. How many people have seen the seal in the audience? Oh, wow.
Yes.
Lots.
It's very famous.
Very famous. I don't watch television. I think that's my trouble.
Yes.
Probably I turn to the audience if you have any comments, questions, or challenges. So please bring the microphone. Nobody?
Thank you very much for your insightful presentation.
Yeah. Please set interpretation.
This is the English channel. Tim-san, okay. So thank you very much for insightful presentations. Thank you very much. So I have, together with Dr. Sankai and also to Mr. Ishiyama, I'd like to ask a common question. You can answer me either in English or Japanese. My question is about the innovation. So when we say innovation, we tend to think about the technical side or technological innovation. And of course, that's right. But then what are we innovating? We have to think about that. Is it social innovation or social revolution? Maybe there is a factor of the social innovation. So that is to say that in order to resolve the social issues or challenges, what kind of innovation are we going to see? So in my case, that is related to sustainability. To create a sustainable social human society, we need innovation. So I'd like to ask that question to Dr. Sankai and Mr. Ishiyama. Yes, let me answer that question. I think you're absolutely right. Social innovation, without that aspect, the technological innovation, we are not sure whether that innovation will bring the benefits for the society. So we have to think about the future, what kind of society we want to build in the future. So we need to do the backcasting so that we can develop what is needed. So that's something that we need to do. But many researchers tend to focus on their own interests. So what would be the future we can build? Without such image, some researchers develop the technologies, so that might lead to some failures. So as you pointed out, this is the type of discussion that we need to have. And I think we are seeing some changes in a way of thinking. So social innovation, we really need to look at the society as a whole or human beings. So that of course, it's necessary to utilize the technology, but also to change the social systems. We have to do this simultaneously. Yes. Thank you. Yes, I completely agree. Inclusive innovation is something that we are working on at our company. So AI researchers and AI engineers, and also domain specialists exist. For example, in the area of the care, there are 7 nurses in our company. So how can we utilize something that we develop? And that is something that we need to keep in mind when we develop AI. And there are a lot of challenges at the forefront of the nursing care. So we really need to have a good targets and try to resolve those challenges. So those people who know the challenges and AI experts, I think that they need to really work together very closely.
The title was innovation as such, but we have to think about innovation not only technological, but more on the goal at the end. It's really social and how to transform our society in the best way, giving potential for the business opportunity, but not only. So that's the key, and actually the keyword is social inclusiveness. Sustainability is really accompanying innovation. That's the trend in Japan, I hope, all around the world. So I saw another question. Yes, please. I have two persons.
Two people back there.
Could you just give the microphone?
It's okay. I can ask now.
No, because we have a translation.
A translation. That can't be translated.
Wait.
Please wait.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Karthik from Kyushu. My question is a nice discussion for the innovative technologists. I'm proud of the technologists. My wonder is, in Japan, I don't know, all the peoples can afford this technology. All are similar, like they can afford. Maybe poor and down and higher level peoples. So what is your opinion to, if you commercialize globally, to get higher level peoples and common peoples? It's a societal technology, no? So what is your opinion?
Okay, Sarah, probably you.
Well, I just.
Of course, UK is free for hospitals.
Anyway, Sankai-san?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So anyway, so now you just mentioned about the Japan cases, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, of course, we have the several types of persons or the cultures and so on. Anyway, fortunately, most of the person loves to introduces the different types of cultures and technology and so on. That one is very important. So, for examples, So, for example, the factory robots cases, okay? So, in those days, industrial robots starts to install to the actual societies. At that time, Japan starts to introduce it. But US or Europe, some workers refuse it. Then, over 80% robots start to work in Japan. And so many improvements are realized, and Japan moves to the next stages. So that one is very important. So now we are discussing about the next generations or the next innovations. Innovation. At that time, so we always discuss about these things and try to install it and obtain the feedback. And in the local side, anyway, we always check the evidences of the values and so on. This one is very important. So Japan has such kind of culture, I think. Yes.
I think another question is really dimension of affordability.
Yeah.
Because today we have two cases. That means we have public fund coming in and combining with this money, but it could be tested in a small community.
I mean, the poor people can afford this technology
Japan
easily to
different
access
country
it.
may be used, so it could be some challenges.
So, okay, I had a contract with the private sector's insurance companies in order to prepare the such support insurance. Then now, so for the very severe progressive nerve disease patient cases, these insurance companies now prepare to pay to support these treatment or the usages.
Do you think it will be a bit like the sort of pharma world, the drug world, where drugs are very, very expensive, and then the middle and low income countries, there is an arrangement that they can have the same medicines. Do you think technology will flow in that way, or will we still have a huge technology gap between the high income and the lower and middle income countries in the world?
Okay, drugs always drink and disappear, okay? But the technology will remain. So we can reuse continuously. So that one is, so share, the concept is sharing.
Right.
Yes.
I'm wondering what fraction of the population at risk your technology is actually going to help. I mean, that's very important to go in considering the cost implications. You know, are we talking hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people?
Okay. But for examples, we use a smartphone, okay? But in Japan, maybe the once a year or once or 2 years, so many persons change it.
Yes.
And this smartphone moves to the another countries very cheaply, okay? And mobile car is similar, okay? So most of the Japanese people change the car 6 years, per 6 years or per 10 years, maybe 10 years maximum. After that, this mobile car moves to the underdeveloped countries and so on. Very cheap, really cheap. So we can share these technologies step by step. Then that one is we can upgrade some bottoms. This cycle is very important, I think.
But I'm still curious to know how many cases you actually would foresee treating. Obviously, at the moment, you're in an experimental phase, but supposing your dreams came true and you were able to roll it out to the entire population of Japan to begin with, how many people would you have to treat per year?
Yes.
Do you think?
So, yes. So maybe so many, I think. So many means, but number of hospital has limitations. Number of nursing centers or care centers has limitation. Then, anyway, most of the person go to the hospitals or such centers. Then, anyway, number of such technology has limitations, I think.
So, but every hospital would have 1 or 2 of your machines.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes,
Sarah. And just to go back to this therapeutic seal. Which is, I'll show you one.
Okay,
one day.
Very good.
Definitely, they are negotiating with the NHS to have it registered as a medical device, and if it is registered as a medical device, then GPs will prescribe it.
Really,
and it will be available on the NHS, and that would be.
And what's the regulatory framework for such things in the UK?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I know is that at the moment it's not a medical device, it's a social device. But once it becomes a medical device, and that means you need the science, robust evaluation to show
that it actually
that
has
genuinely
some cost benefit.
Absolutely, but that's where we are in the UK.
Yes, that's right.
So that then a huge number of older people, in theory, in the UK
will
would have access. Will have seals.
Yeah, so that one is very important. So in the medical side, relatively, so the price is very expensive. But in the actual society's cases, we should reduce it. So then we can reduce some functions and try to reduce some material cost and so on. Then we can prepare the real commercialized normal versions, I think, for the home uses and so on.
I think we need to have very comprehensive approaches and system thinking. I think the time is running, just less than 2 minutes. If you want to say something, the last word on this topic, innovation, I'm welcoming. Nothing left to this. You want to say something? Because when you started
I would like to say one thing, which is that, I mean, these devices are very interesting and so forth, but actually, you know, I would not be here if it were not for science. I mean, twice I have stared death in the face, and twice doctors have saved my life. In these both cases by drugs, one case by antibiotics, in one case by heart medicine and intensive care, and things like that. I mean, actually, you know, my father died 5 years ago compared to me, probably from the very same thing that almost killed me. We probably have some mutation, right? So this kind of, I mean, you know, this was undreamt of when my father died in 1979. In 2010 or whenever it was that I had it, you know, this is routine treatment. I'm a perfectly standard case, and this is a very good example of high-tech medicine just becoming absolutely normal. So I'm sure your devices will follow exactly the same route. If they really work, they will be adopted, and people will find a way to pay for them.
Yes.
Thank you. So
no, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think it's incredibly exciting, and we are in this transition. And I suppose one thing is it's moving so fast. These innovations are just moving at a speed that we've probably never seen before. But I agree. I mean, I think huge potential, so long as they are used sensibly, and and there is a public debate about some of these long-term interactions. But fantastic.
But I wish Google Translate worked a bit better.
So I'm very happy to end this session with a very optimistic, positive thinking. And I'd like to thank all of you, and thank you for the audience listening.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Now, we would like to take a 30-minute